Hi, Aaron.
Can you hear us, Mike?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're on. They're very official. Miss Stanford, are you ready? So I call the Environmental Stewardship Committee meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 15th. This is not February 15th.
You're a month overdue.
And welcome to the March 14th, 2023 meeting of the Mecklenburg County Environmental Stewardship Committee. I am Commissioner Elaine Powell and I serve as our chair. We are committed to the important work of maintaining and enhancing our environment so that all residents can thrive. A virtual attendance option is offered as an alternate mode of accessibility to our meeting today. We welcome the public who have been provided a call-in number to access this meeting. Those attending virtually are asked to display your full name on Zoom as attendance is recorded for the minutes. Additionally, virtual attendees are asked to remain muted and use the chat box to submit comments or questions to be read aloud by the committee. The agenda, meeting minutes, and presentations for today were sent out to those already on the distribution list. If anyone did not receive these and would like electronic copies of any presentation materials, please make your request to Erin Stanforth via email. Her email address is Erin, ERIN, .Stanforth, STANFORTH, @mecnc.gov. We will begin today's meeting by having each board member identify him or herself so that the record will reflect who is present and participating in this meeting. I will introduce myself and call upon each of my colleagues to do the same. Again, I am Commissioner Elaine Powell. I represent the people of District 1, which is all of North Mecklenburg, and serve as vice chair of the board and chair of this committee, the Environmental Stewardship Committee. I did hear from Commissioner Jarrell, who is running a few minutes late, so he will be arriving fairly soon, I hope. And so I'll introduce Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Yes, I'm Commissioner Susan Rodriguez McDowell, representing the most southern part of the district of the county. That's District 6.
Commissioner Altman.
Good afternoon. I'm Lee Altman, County Commissioner serving at large, and it's wonderful to see all of you here today.
For the record, 3 commissioners have acknowledged their presence for this meeting. Therefore, we have a quorum. I will now ask you, Erin Stanforth, to assist with introductions for others who are joining us.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. With us virtually, we have Ebenezer Jarlaputi, Hope Wright, Jonathan McCullough, Leslie Rhodes, Jacqueline McNeil, Ryan Carter, Shauna Caldwell, Tiffany Fant, and Lee Jones.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess we'll start with you, Krista, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your team.
Sure. I am Krista Rogers. I'm the Natural Resources Manager within Park and Recreation, and we manage basically the 8,000 acres of nature preserves throughout the county. So we've got almost our whole staff here today, so I'll pass this around.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Proctor. I have been with the county for about 7 years. I'm a natural resources supervisor, and my main duties include invasive species removal and habitat management.
My name is Clint Brooks and I'm a natural resources supervisor, and all in total, I've been with Mecklenburg County for about 7 years.
I'm Isaac Henson. I'm also a natural resources supervisor. I've worked for the city for 14 years before moving to the county, and my background's in streams and wetlands and water resources.
My name is Devin Walker. I'm a natural resources specialist with the county. I've been with the county a total of about 3 years, and I mainly focus on invasive species removal and prescribed fire.
My name is Jill Bustillo. I'm a natural resources specialist, and I've been with the county for about 3 years as well. And my main duties include prescribed fire and invasive species removal as well.
My name's Abby Richardson. I'm a natural resources assistant. I've been with the county for about a year. I started in education, and now I'm in the Center for Biodiversity Studies with Lenny.
Hello, my name's Lenny Lampel. I'm a natural resources supervisor. I've been with the county for just about 17 years. And my responsibilities include monitoring rare species, conducting biological inventories, and managing our biological collections that are housed within the Dr. James F. Matthews Center for Biodiversity Studies.
Hi, I'm Rob Gilson. I've been with the county since about 2017, and I am the Trail Resources Coordinator. So I'm out there working on your nature preserve trails.
I am Nate Strife, and I'm a Natural Resources Trails Specialist. I work under Rob.
And I'm Chris Matthews, the Division Director for Nature Preserves, and I'm super proud to present this really awesome team that we have here today. We'll be giving you a little presentation here on invasives in a few minutes, but I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to all the great people that do the hard work.
And then we have our Deputy County Manager.
Yes, Deputy County Manager Leslie Johnson has always loved to see one of my most favorite departments in my portfolio. So thank you all.
So I have to tell you guys that I went to the Banff Film Festival this weekend to watch some of the films. And there are people like you in the films protecting old growth forest and biodiversity and things like that. You are some of my favorite people in the world. And I'm just so glad when I walked in and saw Lanny, I thought, oh, what a great team. You're not usually indoors. So thank you for coming indoors. Thanks for being here. And so, oh, I'm so excited about this half. I forgot this half. Okay. So do you want to start? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Connor Newman, and I am the farm manager at Hodges Family Farm, just right next to Reedy Creek Park. So, yeah, we're a century farm, and we're here to talk about support the farmland preservation.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Yvette Townsend Ingram. I am the Director of Foundation Relations at Johnson C. Smith University, and I'm here representing our Center for Renewable Energy and Sustainability.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Carter. I'm Vice Chair of the Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District and a member of the National Association of Conservation Districts Board. So Mecklenburg is now nationally represented, as well as this lady who was a member of the first generation of the Next Generation Leadership Institute. She was one of 7 people across the nation selected from our group to represent Mecklenburg, North Carolina, and farms here.
What she said. Barbara Bleiweiss with Mecklenburg Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'll be working with my teammates here to talk about farmland preservation.
We are the Wallaces, Rob and Donna, and we have a century farm here in Mecklenburg County on property that's been in my family for over 200 years.
And we're here because Barbara's enthusiasm is contagious.
Welcome. Glad to have you here.
I'm Katie Hunt, Sustainability and Resiliency Consultant with Mecklenburg County.
I'm Abby Wyatt, the Livable Met Coordinator with Mecklenburg County.
I think we have everyone now. All right. So I'm just so happy to have a room full of such good people. Moving on, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 15th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Altman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. And moving on, I will now recognize Krista Rogers, one of the best foresters in the Southeast, if not the country, and Katie Proctor from Park and Recreation to present invasive species management. Oh, and here's Commissioner Jarrell. Yay, yay. It was so crowded. You didn't miss anything.
Listen, thanks for stopping just for me.
Oh,
My apologies, everybody.
So Commissioner Jarrell he's part of the reason that we're really concentrating on invasive species right now. And so I'm really glad that you didn't miss any of it. And And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Mark Jarrell, represent District 4. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon again. Just to restate, my name is Katie Proctor and I'm a natural resources supervisor here for Mecklenburg County. And my primary job responsibilities include invasive species removal and habitat management. And this presentation today will be on invasive species management and the steps that natural resources takes to achieve our goals. So just to give a brief overview of invasive species and our current situation and how we got here. Invasive species are basically species that came from other continents. Most of our invasive species are from Europe and Asia. But they basically outcompete our native organisms, our native plants and animals. So today we're going to talk to you mostly about shrubs. We have many different invasive species, but today we're focusing on shrubs in our forested areas. And the way those shrubs outcompete our native organisms is they basically make a thicket within the forest floor. They take up all the sunlight and they push out native plants and they alter ecosystems for wildlife. Unfortunately, Charlotte area is one of the most heavily invaded areas in the country. We think this is because of the I-85 corridor. And also our past land uses in the county. We have a wonderful heritage of farming in Mecklenburg County. But as you know, farming is also a soil disturbing activity. And anytime you disturb soil, you sort of open up a vector for seeds from those invasive species to move in. And in the past, our farms, when they were stopped farming, they were basically ignored. They would become forests, but with those forests were also seeds from invasive plants and animals as well. So we've noticed from our observations in our nature preserves that if something was a farmland 50 to 100 years ago, it's very likely heavily invaded today by invasive plants. The pictures on the right show Gar Creek Nature Preserve, which is in Huntersville. And if you can see the red circles on the top picture, this is a 1938 aerial photograph, and the lighter colored areas were in pastures or farmland in 1938. And it's the same area shown on the bottom picture. This is again Gar Creek Nature Preserve. And the dark blue areas is information that we obtained from our long-term forest management that shows how much invasive species we have. And those dark blue colors are where we have the heaviest invaded areas. So they correspond pretty closely with old abandoned agricultural areas. And as Chris had just touched on, invasive species are the greatest threats to our native organisms outside of development. They significantly reduce biodiversity, they change the habitat structure, and they compete with our native species for space, food, and other resources. Since the agriculture era, there has been little to no land management for decades, and due to this, all of the non-native invasive species have been growing unchecked for all this time. Mecklenburg County has 28 nature preserves that total just under 8,000 acres. And of this acreage, we have found through our long-term forest monitoring that 86% of our acreage is invaded and impacted by an invasive species. So to the right, you'll see the picture of autumn olive. We might refer to it as Elaeagnus umbellata later. That's its Latin name. And through the forest monitoring, we have found that 65% or over 5,000 acres of our nature preserves are impacted and have autumn olive on site. And while natural resources treats all non-native invasive species, a lot of our time and effort is spent just on this one shrub. So 5,000 acres of nature preserve is an awful lot to manage. That's a lot of area. So we have to prioritize these areas. And the best way to do that is to start with our highest quality ecological areas. Those are our nature preserves. And then within our nature preserves, we focus on areas that we have close proximity to federally endangered plants or animals. This is a federally endangered swine-itched sunflower on the left. We have that in several of our nature preserves. Beyond that, the State Natural Heritage Program also designates sites throughout our state that they deem as high quality natural areas. So if we have any of those on our nature preserves, those get high priority for invasive species treatment as well. And then areas where we're able to do our own management, we prioritize those a notch up as well. So we've learned that using prescribed fire is a really effective tool to treat invasive species. So if we can have a burn unit, then that gives a little bump up to the priority of that area. Most of our burn units are in the Mountain Island Lake area. That's where we have our biggest landmass of nature preserves. So it's easier for us to do it there. And then in addition to that, we also focus on areas in parks where we have capital projects upcoming. So we send in contractors there to treat the invasive species so that when they do open up to the public has nice new park facilities to enjoy.
So treating invasives is a multi-step process. It is extremely important to note that it is not a one and done ordeal. So we like to tell the story of invasive species management by using a house analogy. So picture a house that you've lived in for 20 years that you've never cleaned, and then all of a sudden you decide one day that you want to clean it up. That is a very overwhelming and daunting task, and that first cleanup will take a tremendous amount of time and effort. And in order for that house not to revert back to its original state, you would have to do a weekly or monthly cleaning. And then in reality, you would have to continuously clean the house time and time again in order for it not to go back to a clutter disaster that it was before. It's the same with invasive species work. So the first step for autumn olive is the mechanical removal phase. So we would mechanically cut the shrub above ground level and apply a very concentrated herbicide solution to the stump. This is by far the most arduous step in the process, and it takes on average about 28 hours an acre to accomplish. And then once the established shrub is removed, sprouting from the already existing seed bank will happen. And this is where the second step comes in. This is the foliar treatment process. This is where a backpack sprayer is used to spray a much more diluted herbicide solution onto the seedling's leaf. And this is a very targeted application, and it on average takes about 7 hours an acre to accomplish. And then the third step is the monitor and retreatment step. So it's important to note that new infestations and invasions will always happen. And we can go back to the house analogy for this. So your house is the biggest investment that you will make, and you want to protect your investment. So you'll continually clean and do upkeep on your house. It's the same for nature preserves and invasive species. We want to protect the investment by removing the invasive species. And luckily, we are fortunate enough to have staff that can do the work after the first initial treatments to maintain and monitor and retreat all the acreage. And here we put together a timeline example slide for invasive management. And thanks to ELAP funding, we were able to retool our invasive species treatment in a way that's a much more sustainable plan. So year one will be the mechanical cutting phase where you cut and spray the stump. And again, on average, that takes about 28 hours an acre to accomplish. Then year two will be the resprout from the seed bank. Then the first treatment of foliar will happen on year three, which takes about 7 hours an acre. And then years 4, 5, and 6 will be follow-up foliar treatments from the first one, which should take 2 hours or less per acre, and they should decrease each time. And then year 7 will be the monitor and retreat phase, to where we will monitor and maintain the property. And if we see new infestations starting to occur, we will treat them quickly before they get to the massive span that they were before. And also, thanks to the ELAP funding, we can put contractors on year 1 and 3, which is the heavy lifting part of the project, so that natural resources staff can control the infestations after that. So we have permanent photo plots throughout our nature preserves, and this is just a good way to give a visual so that we can see the impacts of our management over the years. This is a picture at one of our photo plots from Latta Nature Preserve, and you can see the trees in the back, sort of the back left as reference points for each photo. The photo on the left was taken in 2020, and this was before any treatment ever took place. And you can see an autumn olive shrub in the forefront there. These shrubs are 6 to 8 feet. They are really thick. They make it nearly impossible to walk through the forest. They really change how wildlife use the forest. If the wildlife can use the forest, it really changes the structure of our preserves.
In the middle photo, this was taken in 2021, right after the first mechanical treatment. So contractors went in and they cut those shrubs at the stump. And you can see the skeletons lying there on the forest floor, but it's a much changed ecosystem. You could walk through it very easily. You can see through it. People can enjoy it. Wildlife can use it better as well. On the right, that was taken in 2023. No other treatments have taken place since the middle photo. It's 2 years later, but you can see the forest floor is starting to green up. That is not native plants moving in. That is the seed bank from the autumn olive just starting to emerge and germinate. So those large shrubs have been putting seed down in the forest floor for years, decades in many cases. So once those seeds germinate, then we can get in and foliar treat those sprouts like Katie was talking about, and hopefully eradicate the primary population of the autumn olive. And so in summary, invasive species are the biggest challenge that we have in natural resources for getting our healthy forests back. It's a pretty heavy lift. And before we had ELAP funding, Natural Resources has been treating invasive species for decades. We've been around for about 25 years, but we've really only been able to treat about 50 acres per year with our staff, just given the overbearing load of invasive species that we have across that 5,000 acres. Since we've had the ELAP funding, we've had contractors working in conjunction with staff. We've been able to treat about 500 acres with the contractors per year on average, and an additional 400 acres by staff with the contractors doing the first part of that treatment. So it's really made a huge difference. In a nutshell, the ELAP funding has really changed our forest and made them better, made our parks, our natural parks areas much better. It's allowed our natural plant communities to come back. And maybe the best part of all, it's allowed natural resources staff to sort of gain control of it so that we can manage our natural forests moving forward in a sustainable way for the long haul. And that's it.
Did you want to add anything, Lenny? Rob, did you want to add anything, Rob? Clint? Okay, anyone? All right. Do you have any questions? Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna make a big admission here. I was losing hope about invasives. I was thinking, okay, why do we throw money at this and then it just keeps growing back? And so I really appreciate the presentation and you going through the steps because I mean, is it sustainable? Like, can we actually make progress? Is it 7 years? Like, until, like, if it's 28 hours per acre and we have 5,000 acres and like 86% of it is invasive, like this seems too huge to overcome, but I don't know. I feel like you gave me a little more hope, but I mean, do you feel confident that we can really make a difference?
I do. It's made a huge difference. So we've with the contractors, with using the money that ELAP has provided, they have treated about 1,500 acres total of nature preserves since they've started. And we have 5,000 acres total. So that's the heavy lift first step. So following that, our process is to have them come back for the second step as well, but that's a much faster step as well. Once they're done with that, as Katie outlined in the treatment steps, it's a much easier task for us to walk through the forest with those backpacks and spray the little sprigs that might still be occurring. But we also have other tools at our disposal. The burning, if we don't have wall-to-wall Iliagnus like it's in that picture on the left there, it burns better. So it just really, like, the presence of those shrubs totally alters the ecosystem. The natural processes are totally different. So once we can remove those, it just helps us, natural resources staff, manage them the way that we should be able to manage them long term. So I think it is sustainable.
You do, okay. And so, but we're only talking about nature preserves. So what about all the parkland, that's not considered a nature preserve?
I had the same question.
You did. It's like I live right behind Colonel Beatty Park, which is, 300 acres of, forest.
And I hear this about Latta Park all the time too.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the reality is that the park department has 22,000 acres of parklands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Plus the nature preserves.
so nature preserves is a third of that acreage. So nature preserves is 8,000. And then we have 14,000 acres, 14,000 acres of parks that would be considered parks. So all encompassing all parklands are 22,000 acres. The expertise lies in nature preserves, and we're trying to protect the best of the best. But as you can see, in the previous slide, we have treated 150 acres of parklands, non-nature preserve parks, including places like Latta, Sugar Creek, some other locations. And then we have a commitment with the upcoming capital improvement program that we'll be working on with the CIP projects for the next 5 years. Whenever we do equity projects or we go in and fix a park, we go in and add stuff to new parks, we will go in and do some invasive species control in there. The challenge that we will have is the long-term maintenance, because the staff here, we can't address 22,000 acres of parks with what we have. So we're going to try and tackle the worst of the worst, the areas where we know we have the high quality natural areas to protect and preserve. And then we'll just continue to keep plugging away. And that's the best that we can do. I will tell you that the commitment that the county, that you guys have made and that the county has made toward invasives, I get people from all over the country calling me and saying, how are you guys doing this? This is like so awesome. We really are leaders in this effort nationwide from a park and rec perspective. So, the reality is it's going to take a while and it's going to take resources and I'm confident that our awesome group here of natural resources folks can help lead the way. But it's going to be a major commitment and we're going to stick with it as long as it takes.
Thank you.
Mr. Altman? So prior to coming to work for Mecklenburg County, I had heard about invasive species from my brother, for whom this is like a full-time focus. In fact, if he were ever to move to Mecklenburg County, I would recuse myself, but send him to try to get a job on your team because he would just love you guys so much. So I am sort of duty bound by family and obviously for other reasons to really want to support this, but not to make my brother embarrassed of me, but I do need to ask you to help me explain to residents, if we didn't make these investments, the shrubs would continue to grow. And you said it impedes the animals' ability to navigate in the forest and make the forest impassable, but help me just bottom line for people who are less emotionally invested in this, a more pragmatic, if there is a more pragmatic way for me to summarize that what we give up when we don't protect, when we don't remove invasives and we allow our natural resources to be overcome by them.
Well, certainly the general overall health of our forest suffers as we outlined, but it has other, this is a like multi-billion-dollar expense to the entire country. It changes the way these shrubs are not very good at holding soil, so it changes water quality. So our general ecosystem services are really changed. It's vast. Lenny, you want to have some additional. Some of, not particularly autumn olive, but several species of invasive species are also toxic to birds and wildlife. So when they do consume these as what they think is food, it is harmful to them and will cause death in some. So that's also another heartstring if you would want to pull on that.
Gotcha.
I would also add that, we as people are part of the environment, and when our environment isn't healthy, it has an impact on us. Right. And so we're all interconnected with this whole deal. So to have our forests and our parks, our parklands and our greenways healthier makes it healthier for us as well. Cleaner air, cleaner water, less erosion. We're all in this together. And so to be able to address this, in the way that we're doing helps improve overall health and wellness for everyone in the community.
Great. And then my last question is, places like Lowe's that sell invasives are like working against everything you're doing every day. And so how much of what we're experiencing in our parks and nature preserves are a function of current consumers going and buying products that are harmful? And is there anything you've seen other communities do to try to help raise awareness in our places of commerce to not just have them be defeating the work we are, doing here? If you understand my question.
So I do know that North Carolina this year, I think, has a Bradford pear bounty going on now. Where's she, Lane? So I do see some strides in that. And then I also know that some HOA organizations, they tell you, like, you cannot plant this plant in this neighborhood because it will take over and we will not allow it. A lot of those are invasive plants such as English ivy. I've seen some of them do it with Nandina. So it depends on where you live, and I guess the importance it is to the people around that area. But a lot of other, so the new invasions will occur with the planting of the ornamentals, but it will also occur just through spread with wildlife. So that's one vector, but there are other vectors. Our smaller properties are definitely more vulnerable to being invaded by those horticultural plants that people get at Lowe's. Just because they have so much surface area against those high density neighborhoods. But our larger areas really see, like, we see different species causing problems in different sized nature preserves. So in our larger preserves, we mostly have a problem with this shrub and also Chinese privet. But both of those have been used horticulturally, not so much anymore. But like Katie said, we still see English ivy sold quite a bit in stores. We still see Bradford pears sold under different names. Some states have, their agricultural departments have policies that don't allow these things to be sold. I don't know of any of that in North Carolina other than the Bradford pear bounty, but there are different policy measures that can take place. Thank you.
And while it's not widespread, we are doing some fairly significant social media postings about invasives and what to plant and what not to plant. And we had a recent posting, I think, last week about it. So we're really trying to use every resource that we have to help educate people.
Commissioner Jarrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me just say thank you for the presentation, number one, and thank you all for your work and what you're doing. It's really, really important to the community. And you guys are out there doing the heavy lift every day. I think my colleagues raised some really great points. A couple of things. To me, and I'm just a layman, it doesn't seem like we have enough resources to address the problem adequately. When you think about year one, we're talking 28 hours per acre. Year three, I think it was, goes down to 7, which is fantastic. But even when you look at those numbers and then you look at our comprehensive footprint with respect to the number of acres that we have in our entire park footprint, it doesn't seem adequate. So the first thing I want to understand is how many folks do we have from a Mecklenburg County perspective that are addressing the issue? How many hours per week are people devoted to this? And then from a contracting standpoint, how many people do we have addressing it?
So in our group, I think we have 3 or 4 directly treating invasive species, but then we have several, all of us are involved in prescribed burning, which is directly treating invasive species. And then there's people in other departments too who treat invasive species primarily, like in stormwater services. They have contractors that do invasive species management within stormwater areas.
So let me put it this way, because it's not fair to ask you guys that staffing question. So somebody, if they can give us some information around the staffing piece of it, because if your department is 3 to 4 people, we're talking X number of thousands of acres. Again, I hear us saying that we have it under control, but I will have to be honest. What I hear from the community is concern I think we need to, I think I need to be able to better understand how to address the community's concerns with respect to how we're tackling this, right? Do we have enough resources? What should their role be with respect to helping us? Because I'm just disconnected from the numbers right now. Yes, ma'am.
So sure, it's a valid question. We realize that this is an important topic or issue for our community, and how do we proactively or reactively get on top of this and manage it accordingly? And I think what you know already is that you have a leadership team that's committed to make change and differences. Notwithstanding that, I think it's unrealistic to think that we'll be able to move the dial and get 100% eradicated, mitigated, under control, and be able to maintain and sustain that. That is an unrealistic, every weed you see, every invasive you see. This is Leslie's opinion. I'm not an expert. These are the experts. They can either nod north, south, or do like this. I do not know. I don't believe that we will be able to do it throughout the system in its entirety. I think I don't think, even if you say hire a contractor, Chris and I, and Chris more me, that we have conversations, and Chris is regularly talking to the private sector or the marketplace to better understand their resources and capacity to take on contractual opportunities. And we have to slowly do that as they build their system up. So you can't go from 0 to 180 overnight. I do believe, as we continue to have strategic conversations and plan and work with our contractors and we went from 50 to thousands. And I think we can go from the thousands to a little bit more, right? So we can make good strides. I think most of our we have a greater, this is not going to be fair, but I'm going to say this. I think when I see data, or when I react with my friends, my circle of friends, more of my circle of friends go to the parks than they go to the nature preserves.
Sure.
And so when they see clovers and chickweed and all this other stuff, they think they just name it. If they're going to name it invasives other than weeds, they're going to name it that way. And so their viewpoint is, we need to get rid of these invasives. And while it's important to kill the weed and not have it there and everything like that, the ones that are the most important are the ones that are going to really have detrimental to our ecosystem, which is in the nature preserves, because you need the treed and wooded area in order to ensure that you maintain the air quality and the like. We're working towards parks, but as people go and visibly see stuff in parks, it may not happen. Notwithstanding that, there may be things that we can continue to explore, just like we have volunteer efforts to say, are there ways that we can stand up volunteers, train them? Because it's not just going out there and spraying. Like Leslie don't know how to move invasive species.
That's right.
I'd probably mess things up. And I don't want people to just go out there and think they can just spray and they're treating it, because these people have expert knowledge in what they're doing.
That's right.
And this expert knowledge is like a dinosaur. It's not out there readily. So that's the other piece too. You've got to make sure these great talented people, there's not hundreds of thousands of them in the Charlotte market. So you want the experts to do it and do it right, but you also got to make sure you have the experts in your marketplace. So that's my last comment.
So
we will continue to work towards it and be able to come up with a plan that helps us get there a little bit more aggressively.
Yeah, and so I certainly appreciate that. And I think where I'm trying to go with this is, one, I want to be able to effectively communicate to our residents that are very, very concerned about this, right? And so being honest and saying, like you said, Dr. Johnson, which I really appreciate, is the fact that, number one, 100% eradication of the issue is not plausible. And that's fine, right? We just have to level set if that's the case. But I also want to understand, and I hope we can get the responses to my questions. I would like to understand, I think it would be good for the committee to know, how many folks do we have addressing the issue from internal and external perspective, and what they devote to that, because I suspect everybody's not devoting 100% of their time, boots on the ground, to this issue. There may be a percentage that are doing that, but I suspect it's not 100%. And so just being able to level set with the community, I think is really, really important. And if we're saying the prioritization of nature preserves, that's fine. But I have people in parks that are asking me about it as well. So I want to be able to be honest and say, look, priority number one is the nature preserve. Here's why. Parks for secondary, and here's why. And this is what our process is. to get to, and Commissioner Altman can co-sign on this, to get to LADA. And Chris, you know that too. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked the questions about who is dedicated, because, and Chris, you might want to speak to this, or maybe I need to request it afterwards if you don't know the answer. But since we are kind of skeleton crew on invasive species in-house, when we hire contractors, what happens if there's a lull? Like when the contractors get into the groove of being here in Mecklenburg County, because like I stopped to talk to them, a group of contractors on McCoy Road, when they were doing invasive removal. But what happens when there's a lull in their contract? Like they work for us, they get the work done for 8 months, and then they have to go somewhere else because they don't have anything else to, there's no more money.
So when we first started doing invasives, the number that we got, that was a real problem for us, right? Because it started out as 200,000, I think was the very first year. And that really didn't go very far for us. And so it was a challenge. Where we are now is much, much better. But we've also talked, I mean, the last time that we had the meeting we had last time, I gave a presentation on invasives. There was a request to add some additional funding. I believe that's occurred. That additional funding will allow us to not stop. And so as we move forward, I actually had a conversation with Leslie this morning about what does a good budget ask look like so that we don't ever have to stop and slow down. And so we're looking at trying to make good, smart decisions about what our budget looks like so we can just keep rolling. Two things real quick. So when I first started with the county 14 years ago, I was the natural resources manager. So I was the Krista Rogers of the group. And we had people that literally full-time almost did nothing but invasive species removal. And quite frankly, staff got injured because they were working so hard on this. And so to be able to have contractor dollars to where they can rotate people around, we don't have staff 100% dedicated to it, it makes for a much better working environment. And we're better at clearing invasives out. So I think that this model is a really good model because we're not beating staff up all the time, and we have the ability to do other things because we got so many things that we have to do. I think the second thing that I would say is that nature preserves are also parks. And so people that live near Reedy Creek Nature Preserve, that's their local park too. So we talk about nature preserves and we talk about parks, and sometimes we think about them differently, but I would encourage everyone to think about them the same. Because for some people, if you live next to LADA, that's your local park too. And while you may not be able to play ball there, you certainly can go out and enjoy recreation, right? So quite frankly, our biggest challenge is going to be our greenway properties, because every time it floods, we get brand new seed, and seed comes in from all over the place. So our greenways are always going to be our hardest thing to do. And we have treated some greenways. We did 4 Mile Creek Greenway down where Trader Joe's is along Bevington. We did some work down there. That, quite frankly, is always going to be the most difficult thing that we'll have to do. So I think, I hope that we're able to continue with this really important work. I know that a lot of our volunteer efforts through our volunteer services program have historically revolved around invasive species removal. We can continue to do that and engage the community and get people trained and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're at a really good point in time to where we could really leverage all the resources that we have to really start to make a difference. And I think we are making a difference. It's just a little bit slower than I think some people would hope.
So I want to say a couple things and I'll get you. I can't even manage all the invasives in my own yard. So I'm glad you level set, because 100% would be impossible. I was looking out the window at my Iliagnus that sprouted up. And so it is very difficult. And I think we need to talk a lot more about what if we don't do this. because the consequences are grim. And when I was growing up, this shows how old I am. When we were in biology in 7th grade, they said there was no function of the gallbladder. And I remember thinking, surely there's a function, like we just don't know it yet. And in the Banff Film Festival, we talk about the old growth forest and the connectivity and the things underground that we don't know about. And what happens when we don't pay attention to protecting the forest and we don't pay attention to protecting biodiversity. There are things that we don't know. And so it's really important to protect the native species. And I think this is a really important part of it. And I want to thank the people out loud from the Latta Park, because if they weren't always talking about it and being involved, they wouldn't have come to the Stewardship Advisory Council a long time ago. And then Dumont asked for $250,000, and it started out at $250,000 in restricted contingency. And so here we are, because at that time we had like a $6 million ask. We're like, we need $6 million a year for invasive species removal, which it's hard to find that kind of money in our budget. And so I really appreciate like how it's been done in our environmental leadership action plan, but I want to make sure that we're funding it appropriately, like that we're not underfunding it. And there's more I want to say. A field trip, like if you guys want to see the wall of Iliagnus and angel trees and kudzu and privet and everything that is invading our forest, I will coordinate a field trip for this committee, because it is real. Like if I look beyond my fence, I can see so much Iliagnus. And I want to say that I'm glad you brought up what we do at our parks whenever we're doing any kind of capital improvement project, because significant work was done at Chagall Creek, and the community around it did not understand like that all of this green was invasive species. And so some people were upset by it. They're like, what is happening? Because they considered that like a privacy fence. And so we had to do education around there to make sure they understood why we were doing it. Yeah. But every community deserves that. Like every community needs to have the invasive species removed. And when they see how much it is, it's really significant. So even at Hornets Nest Park, like I wish that was on the top priority, but we have to prioritize somehow. But Hornets Nest is just like swamped in invasives. And then I did work on invasive species removal for a long time. So I really appreciate what you said, Dr. Johnson, because we need to train the volunteers, because people were we were there for kudzu and people started cutting muscadine. And I was like, like, don't do that. But they didn't know any better. So we have to be real careful and make sure we do really good training for our volunteers to make sure they're not cutting out our natives that the birds rely on. And I could talk about this for a long time, but I really appreciate the work you do. And I'm glad that we have momentum. We just need to make sure that we're funding it appropriately. Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Thank you. I just had one more ask, and that is, and this, may seem a little nerdy, and I hope it's not too much trouble, but is it possible to get some kind of a graph or like a thermometer of some sort to show the progress? Like, where are we in phase, 1 or like year 1? Where are we in year 2? That kind of thing, just to kind of see if, for me, I'm very visual. And I'd like to be able to quantify a little bit the progress. So if it's not too much trouble, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. We track all this using GIS, so I think we'll be able to come up with some visual representation of the progress that we've made over the years, and we'll figure that out and get it over to you.
Cool, thank you.
So I think we're good. I do want to request a field trip. It's not required. But if you want to see, it would be good to go with the experts and see what we're talking about and see it firsthand. And
Actually see them doing the backpack or the mechanical.
However you want to do that, like, yeah, that is cool.
That'd be fascinating.
Madam Chair, I think we should also, I'd like to see some information on what community engagement does look like. to your point. I mean, I'm curious. So when we go into different areas, are we just naturally doing community engagement at that point, or like, what does that look like? I mean, and you know, you can just give us the information, Chris, like later. It didn't.
Like the things that Laura does where she teaches the community about the invasives, Laura Domingo, and she does the whole education and community engagement and getting people to come into like Ribbon Walk. That's one of the places where the community goes.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. If we're doing community engagement, love to see what communities have been engaged, who's next on the list, where we're going, and that way we can start helping push that out. What do the sessions look like? Do we request it? So just, you know, sort of that kind of thing.
You help me help you.
Absolutely.
Are you speaking specifically around when we're educating people what we're doing in their neighborhood? And or are you talking about the volunteer work that we do to try to engage volunteers to be helpful in this effort?
No, thank you, Leslie, for that. I was really referring to when we're showing up in the neighborhoods, right? So we're coming around your area, and to the point that you made, Madam Chair.
Okay.
What does that engagement look like?
Okay. And I'm sure there's opportunity for us to improve.
I know you're doing a great job. I'm just curious.
Aaron.
Lee Jones has his hand raised. I want to give him an opportunity to speak. Lee, can you take yourself off mute?
I will. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the board for their support. I want to thank this committee for its advocacy. I want to thank Deputy County Manager Leslie Johnson for her understanding and her guidance. And I want to thank Chris Matthews and our Natural Resources and Nature Preserves Division. It's just one thing I wanted you all to know about these excellent people here. We were doing this when Chris became, I think at first I used to hear about it when I was the head of capital planning, was when Chris became the head of Nature Preserves of Natural Resources and used to talk about it. We were doing this, the team was doing this, but it was an insurmountable task and they still trudged forward because we did not have set aside funding for it. But over the past several years with the funding and support from the board and the manager's office, we've been able to approach this in a very systematic and I think in successful way. And I too am hoping we can continue down this path so people can see that we're really making a difference in protecting our natural environment and our natural resources. So thank you.
Thank you, Lee. One more thing, Commissioner Altman.
I just want to say the part about trudging forth and not having y'all do this all the time. I've helped the advocates of Ladder Park before. It is back-breaking work. It's extremely difficult. I did not know where to put the poison. It was hard. It was, you know, everything that has been said here is true. And I'm glad that you're focused on preserving a good work environment so that you like working for Mecklenburg County and state. Thank you.
And I know that you guys aren't normally inside this many hours. So I'm guessing that you might have to leave. I really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate the work you do.
Yeah.
I hope you carry that with you. Thank you. And take pictures for us. Take pictures of the biodiversity and yeah, take pictures. Yeah.
Since we're stuck in here.
Thank you. All right.
All the cool kids are leaving. Just those nerdy ones are left.
Yeah.
The cool kids are leaving, the nerdy ones are left here now.
Yeah, I love it.
I will now recognize Aaron Stanforth.
Right. Hello, my name is Erin. I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Manager for Mecklenburg County. With me, we have Barbara Weiss, Mecklenburg County Soil Water Conservation District. Nancy, also Soil Water Conservation District, and these amazing farmers and advocates in our community. So thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to try to go fast because I know we've got public policy at 2:30. Tell me if I'm going too fast. So when we were last here, and I wanted to lead with this. So every photo that you see in this presentation, Barbara and I took over the course of the last 18 months at in Mecklenburg County, like farms. So just keep that in mind. You see those cute cows. So So we were last here in October of 21, not 22. We proposed developing a farmland preservation plan in partnership with the Soil Water Conservation District. And so since then, we've been quite busy. We did apply to the Agriculture Development Farmland Preservation Trust Fund Grant that was submitted in December 21. It was awarded in October 22. The purpose of that was to help us with funding for assistance with drafting and then finalizing the farmland preservation plan. We were awarded that funding and a letter of support from our county manager was submitted. We do have until October 24 to spend all of that funding. And so simultaneous with that grant, we met with 46 farmers in all corners of the county, 3 of which were Century Farms. You see up top, we have Hodges Farm with Connor leading a workshop that we had down below. Right here are some cows that are at this lovely farm behind us. And then Barbara, of course, at the Town of Davidson Farmers Market. So we listened to farmer stories, went on tours of farmers and visited farmers markets from really all walks of life throughout the county. But the reason for us visiting these farms was to collect data to attempt to answer the following questions. What does a farmland preservation plan mean to farmers? If there was a farmland preservation plan in place, what would farmers want to see within it? How much farmland does the county really have? Where are these farms located? And how does farmland preservation address our ELAP goals? The purpose of this slide here is not to read all of, excuse me, you can read whatever you want, but I'm not trying to convey every single theme or every single piece of feedback that we received. The purpose here is to showcase that we heard tons of feedback from farmers from all walks of life, and the overarching 5 themes, which are very similar to what's within the Environmental Leadership Action Plan, include land preservation, estate planning, economic development and sustainability, environmental stewardship, and quality of life. And so again, we heard from farmers from all walks of life, but these are the 5 core themes that emerged out of those discussions. And the very interesting, how much farmland is within Mecklenburg County. So this was created by GIS. Scott Black is incredible. The red, I guess, column on the far right is the total acres by land use. So in totality across the county, we've got over 13,000 acres that could be categorized as farmland. Interestingly, over 732 of those acres are actually county-owned parkland with an agricultural component. That's I'm forgetting the name of the parks on the top of my head, but they're in. Go ahead.
It was a Easel Park. Easel, excuse me, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. We were never sure. Rural Hill.
Right.
There was one other, but that was the totality of the.
So just interesting.
I think.
And so simultaneous with collecting all this data, talking to farmers, submitting this grant, we also looked at other farmland preservation plans that exist in the state. Interestingly, there are quite a few of farmland preservation plans in the state, and they vary by intensity and complexity. 2 examples that are included in this presentation include Chatham. So Chatham County developed their first plan in 2010. They do have an agricultural advisory board that's appointed by their own board of county commissioners, and they have 3 full-time staff people associated with this plan, along with other efforts throughout their district. They have established a voluntary agricultural district, and the definition of that is in that italicized text below. The voluntary ag district is a common theme that we saw in other farmland preservation plans throughout the state. We, Mecklenburg County, do not have a voluntary ag district as of right now. The other plan that we looked at was Buncombe County. So Buncombe's interesting in that their first, I guess, plan, if you want to call it that, was adopted in 2007. If their initial farmland preservation ordinance was adopted in 1989, they updated that plan in 2020. They also have an agricultural advisory board appointed by their board, and they've got 5 staff people that are working on farmland preservation and just preservation in general for their district. They also have a voluntary ag district. And so with all of this being said, we met with farmers, we looked at other farmland preservation plans, we tried to get as much data about the county as we could, and we visited many a farmer and many a cow. And so with all that being said, I'm going to dive into our farmland preservation plan. Now, I do want to be really transparent in saying that there's 4 overarching strategies, and then there's some action items underneath each strategy. One of the strategies is really exciting, so there's more slides for that one. It's about a public-private partnership. We'll get into that in a moment. But I'm just gonna go through these, and feel free to just flag me and stop me and ask me questions, because I want to get you guys out of here on time. Okay, so the 4 strategies for the plan are to, 1, protect farmland through voluntary programs that incentivize land preservation, conservation, and succession planning. The second is to promote agricultural workforce development of next generation farmers. The third is to promote agricultural economic development. And the fourth is promote farmland preservation, conservation, and equity through innovative public-private partnership programs. And so that first strategy, we have some action items listed below. Essentially, we want to conduct workshops that are helping to educate our farmers around what's happening countywide, and also uplift work that's happening countywide. Another action is to partner with local trusts to advocate for a conservation easement matching fund program and to establish a voluntary ag district, similar to the other farmland preservation plans we looked at a minute ago. That second strategy is to, 1, create a guide, next generation farmer guide. Also to create a mentor/apprentice program, connecting new farmers with more experienced farmers in the county. The third is to use existing and then apply for additional state, federal, private funding for the purposes of new equipment, supplies, and educational courses, and then appropriate seed or matching grant funding if that's applicable. And then something really fun is to conduct a study to evaluate the creation of a teaching farm program on public land. Third strategy, include the district conservation program reporting in county stormwater monthly meetings, establish an agriculture economic mini grant program, research best practices within the state and other conservation districts that provide incentives to farmers that do not currently qualify for present use value program, explore the feasibility of streamlining the permitting process for value added marketers/farmers, communicate funding opportunities to local farmers, and then conduct biannual events that are showcasing our farmers throughout the county. And so this is our 4th strategy, which is my favorite. But we've actually broke up the strategy in 2 different slides. So the strategy reads, and let me move this down, sorry about that, is to, again, promote farmland preservation, conservation, and equity through innovative public-private partnerships. And so the first kind of action to get us there is to identify and acknowledge food deserts and equity in Mecklenburg County. And so some strategies to get us, or actions to get us to that strategy, are to support the development of future land ownership opportunities for next generation Black farmers, to develop options to expand food access and combat food deserts for Mecklenburg County residents, and then to partner with the Mecklenburg County Soil Water Conservation District and North Carolina Foundation for Soil and Water Conservation to pursue grants. And then the last strategy of the 4th strategy is to formalize a partnership with the Working Farms Fund to preserve farmland, invest in agricultural production of that land, and to provide a pathway to land ownership for next generation farmers. Strategies to get us to that include, establishing a 5-year plan that identifies and prioritizes potential farmland acreage for acquisition, to develop a conservation easement funding strategy, identify soil and water conservation technical and financial assistance strategy, identify a next generation farmer pipeline and workforce development strategy, and establish a diversity, equity, and inclusion partnership with Johnson C. Smith University. Exciting stuff. And so before I get into that slide, I want to say, if I can go back. So the Working Farms Fund is something that's really exciting, interesting, and unexpected. We were approached by, the district and the county, or county and district, were approached by the Conservation Fund in December 21-ish, around there, November, December. So the Conservation Fund is an overarching national organization that operates a multitude of different programs. Everything that's in green are programs and I guess partnerships that they manage. The orange box is what we're talking about that's specific to us. So the Working Farms Fund, which I'll talk about in a minute, is managed by the Conservation Fund. So the Conservation Fund, I've got their mission listed here. So this little box is like taking up some room. I'm not going to read through this, but essentially the Conservation Fund is committed to protecting our most critical lands and waters collectively across the country. They do have a huge focus on locally led programs and partnerships, which is interesting. A lot of, and this is just Aaron speaking, a lot of larger national organizations similar to the Conservation Fund tend to focus on national brands and national campaigns and don't really connect at the granular level. So I think that's really exciting for us. So keeping the Conservation Fund in mind, the Conservation Fund has been doing work in North Carolina for quite a while, exterior of the Working Farms Fund. Currently, the Conservation Fund works to protect over 236,000 acres of land and water in our state. I've got some projects listed here. I'm not going to dive into those, but you can see that they're doing a lot of work around stream restoration, a lot of work around food deserts, a lot of work around forests, but not yet the Working Farms Fund. So the Conservation Fund approached us and said, hey, we want to partner on this really new, exciting program we've been doing in Atlanta and Chicago. We think Mecklenburg County is a great fit. What do you guys think? And Barbara and I were like, what does that mean? So essentially, the Working Farms Fund, which was launched in early 21, it's an innovative program that rebuilds local food system and creates sustainable farm businesses. So essentially, the fund works to create a pathway to affordable land ownership for diverse next generation farmers. They work to break down traditional barriers to capital for farmers. Everything's listed here. Essentially, how the fund works is the Conservation Fund works with farmers and works with available land to identify acres that they can purchase, and then they lease to own those parcels to farmers that can't necessarily afford to do that themselves. That tends to flow between 2 to 5 years, and over time, it can really balloon out and to be a really successful program. It's been operating in Atlanta. It's been operating in Atlanta since early 21. They have down there, they've got roughly 30 farmers. 83% of those farmers are minority, immigrant, or female owned and did not have access to capital or to have a farm or to have a collective to actually build a farm prior to this program existing. They have identified us as their next pilot area for Working Farms Fund, which is really interesting. The fund itself is funded through state, national, and philanthropic funding. They may look to us at some point for funding for conservation easements in quite a few years from now. Oh, and that's something I forgot to mention. So when the Working Farms Fund purchases the parcels, they also purchase a conservation easement on top of that parcel to keep it as farmland for the duration of time.
Perpetuity.
It's better. This is a summation of the Conservation Fund's work. So this is a combination of both Chicago and Atlanta, but it's just trying to convey what the work that the Conservation Fund has done so far within the Working Farms Fund. And I think with that, I just flew through those. That's all of our slides. This is just a repeat of the strategies that I said at the very, very beginning. And I wanted to open it up for questions and any comments from anyone that's here with us.
Don't have an answer question. This is, we could talk forever because we spent a lot of time with them. The Conservation Fund actually came back into town several times and more recently met with town meetings because they had their farms there, farmers interested in selling their land and they like to keep it farmland. So the dynamic that we talked about even a year ago, where you have farmers within Mecklenburg County being somewhat pressured to sell, but really want to keep it under land stewardship. So the comments, for example, that you guys made about land that had been sold and I'll say abandoned, but properly conserved farmland won't have really that problem. And these are examples of kind of stewardship that we espouse, that the Conservation Fund encourages. The land that we're talking about, the 13,000 acre, our goal is to conserve every bit of it. Whether or not we can do that, of course, is subject to a lot of things. But with that, we're very excited about that partnership and also with Johnson C. Smith University. We're going to be bringing a whole factor that has been ignored in the past. And that's one reason we can talk more in detail about the immense value we bring to the table to this. Any questions I didn't have to answer?
Before I start, I just want to say when the Conservation Fund called, I'm guessing that you and Barbara did the Snoopy dance? Oh.
Question.
I have a question.
Okay, Yvette.
Thank you. I want to thank Barbara Blywise. She has been just, I can't even express how wonderful she has been, meeting with us several times, including us in this for the diversity, equity, and inclusion portion of it, and working with Dr. Mark Dugo with our Center for Renewable Energy and Sustainability. As you know, I've often said within the community advocating that all of our issues are cyclical. So I'm trying to find a way to fund, that's what I do. I write grants to fund programs and opportunities for us to link answers, if you will, for all of the challenges that we have in our community. For instance, of course, Johnson C. Smith University sits in a food desert, and everybody knows that. We have a lot of little local Black farmers. We have, problems with CMS and funding food for them and children having their lunch bills paid. So I just see this great big cycle of issues that can be addressed if we collaborate and if we have the data, because the data is what pushes out the money. If we can convince people that this is a large enough problem, that it's linked to enough issues, then we can get them to fund it. So my first question after saying all that is there any way that this data can be put in the Quality of Life Explorer? Do you guys have that information, dividing it up by demographics, things of that nature?
When you say information, do you mean?
I mean, just the information that you put up there, the demographics of it, how many people are impacted, how much farmland we have, where it's located. Do you include Johnson C. Smith University's little sustainability village in that? Is it private? Is it, where is it?
Sure, good question. So yes, we can put any and all data into the Quality of Life Explorer because we have our Livable Met coordinator right here who manages that very tool. But yes, the short answer is yes. Okay. And in something I should have mentioned in your packet, the longer non-land acquisition 11 by 17 is a smaller version of that map right up front, which is a map of any and all of farmland, that chart that I showed earlier with all the different acres. It's hard to read, I'll give it that, but it is that 13,000 acres are labeled within that map. So yes.
For those, I know this is not available unfortunately to those online, but Scott Black is awesome. Awesome.
Thank you.
Scott Black created this initially. The color codes give you a sense for the districts. So I think you guys know where you're located. Most of the farmland is in District 1. There is farmland, of course, here. Mid Hill, it's where the Wallaces are. There's some here on this side, actually by the airport. There's actually a person that raises goats and so forth by the Whitewater Center. So but they're mostly here. The 13,000 acres, what was important about that, and I would clarify that does not include Sustainability Village, is what they consider present use value. So that is the tax deferral program very specific to agricultural land, set up by the North Carolina Department of Revenue. It's legislatively established. It was a way to show the county commissioners what land is actually an agricultural use. So Johnson C. Smith, as an example, wouldn't fall under that category. Not that it's not important, but when you're talking about where is the 13,000 acres of land that is agricultural, present use was the best litmus test for that. There are farms in District 1 that do not meet that, but are farming. They are what they call bona fide farmers, but they don't benefit from that program. May be on the map, but they're not on the present use. 13,000 is probably a very good figure. What 2017 USDA census, which is again voluntarily submitted data, had about 11,600 acres. So the farms are kind of holding steady. The Working Farms Fund is the opportunity to try to the extent that we can, lock that in and find ways that we can incentivize farmers to defer selling to developers. Right. So what's important is that all of this is voluntary. So we're not introducing a new regulation or handcuffs. We want to give farmers the options.
I had one more question. And I'm not even sure if you can address this, but I'm addressing it to our Board of County Commissioners. A year ago, I became involved with and was a leader on what the county called participatory budgeting. We put in a lot of work, months and months, actually about 2 months worth of work. And our district, I was my district's lead, District 2, the most powerful district, you tell her I said that. But I want to know, how far have we come? Because we had a lot of sustainability and conservation efforts that would involve the community in that program. We had $500,000 to spend. I don't know if that was per district or what, but I want to know, are we started with that? We had like Plant a Seed and Learn. We had community gardens in places in the food desert. We had like little spots that we were piloting. Can you talk to me about
I can
that?
tell you a little bit, and Deputy County Manager might need to add to it. But we are committed to that. And because so many of the priorities came back in a similar buckets, a lot of priorities throughout the entire county came back to put a responsibility on Park and Rec and the staff that works at Park and Rec. And so we're trying to figure out the plan of how to get it all accomplished. And do you want to add any more than that?
Sure, thanks. I don't have on my phone easily accessible, but I can follow up with you to give you District 2. What I would say at the 100,000-foot view is the team is committed to execute it. So as Commissioner Powell was saying, a lot of the recommendations were park related, not all, but a lot. And so just like you saw a lean team here, it's a lean team holistically for what we're trying to do enterprise-wide. The team has, and I think I have another couple of weeks, another check-in with them. They have created, I'm gonna call it a project timeline for when they're going to execute some of this work and the like. However, what we recognized is that the suggestions, by the time you get, if you need a contract, a vendor and the like, to actually go from vision to action, it takes almost 12 to 18 months, depending on what it is. So things probably are at the early phase of motion, but it hasn't been forgotten. It's on our list and it's being executed, whatever that helps.
We're excited about it. So thank you for being part of it. And so I'm going to start with Commissioner Altman and then go to Commissioner Rodriguez-McDowell.
Thank you. I feel a lot of energy and excitement around this. It's a pleasure to hear this creative thinking and innovation that is so holistic for the environment, for people, it's just, I'm very excited about this. And I guess my only question is, what is the sort of next actionable step that you want the county commissioners to do, or this committee to do, so that we can continue to move this forward?
Sure, I'll respond to that. At the 100,000, this is received as information. We know that Barbara came to this group several months ago, maybe, I don't know if it's been a year yet or not, but to say, passionate about farmland preservation, we want you to take action. And so that was the partnership that we've had. So we've got a plan. The plan is the district's plan. It's not the county's plan, it's the district's plan, but we are going to have alignment to those actions that will be kind of infused as a subset of our environmental leadership action plan or whatever. So we're going to be committed to. So you may see the environmental leadership action plan potentially get refined to talk about farmland preservation. And so we'll have that alignment there. And then we're going to continue to partner to execute it. The next step that between Barbara and Aaron and others will be coming up with now an implementation plan that says, because all of these actions cannot be done in 1 year. So we're going to have a phased in multi-year plan to support how we're going to do it, what work is going to be the district, and what work can we as the county take on their behalf for the community.
Right.
And you may see something in the budget request that's aligned to it.
Right. So that was going to be my next ask. Are we talking about fund balance in the short term, or by the time you're ready to take a first step, it would be budget time anyway? I guess it would be budget time anyway.
We have had preliminary conversations, Aaron and I, with the budget team and putting stuff in and the like. So I would say we haven't started, Dina has not started making her sausage for what she's having in her recommended budget for. That has not really officially commenced on her end, but it's getting ready to, and I envision that there may be something that you may see there. But
Thank
we
you.
have committed that we're gonna, depending on the implementation plan, figure out what we need when and go
Thank
accordingly.
you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Really appreciate everybody who's worked so hard on this.
Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell?
Thank you. So the definition of a visionary is Barbara Blywise. Okay, so I just want to say, I mean, you are exactly what was needed in this. So I just appreciate your work so much. And I do have a question. Well, first of all, I know what the word century means. It means 100. Is that 100 acres, 100 years, 100 what? Years?
100 years under stewardship with a single family.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty impressive.
Okay, so we have 2 century
They
farms.
get 200, they get,
We
They have a
we've
set-
been on the same place. Her family's been on the same place for 252 years. 1771.
Wow, what a legacy. That is
All the
amazing.
way back to, the first deeds were made when, our farm, which is now in Mecklenburg County, was actually a part of Anson County. There's a lot of history associated with our place because it was a focal point for the conflict of the king's agents trying to collect vestry taxes. And so that's one of the things that caused Mecklenburg County to be set off in 1768. So our first deed is 1762, but her family has owned the land since, and we farmed it for the last 56 years.
Wow.
And so the first deed that came to her family was 1771.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
we have strong attachment to the land, and I agree with a lot of what's been said about good stewardship of the land. Good stewardship of the land certainly contributes to everybody's welfare.
and of course Connor also with Hodges Family Farm, they're a Century Farm as well. And Julia Rogers, who is, I think by Zoom, she is Blackberry Ridge and she was Century Farm as well.
Wow, that's amazing. But I did want to ask about Ezel because that is in Mint Hill in my district. And I was wondering, because I mean, I know it's been, the county has owned, you know, the land for at least 20 years, I think, because I've been getting phone calls from people like, we've been waiting for 20 years for this park. Okay, so it's being turned, part of it is being turned into a park, but so can you speak to me, someone about, is it still going to be farmland? I know there's going to be I knew there was going to be a community farm portion of the park.
Here's what I know. When that subject came up, I actually sat down with Lee Jones, hopefully he's still in, and we talked about exactly that. The owner of the land, I guess at the time it was sold to the county, the desire was to keep some portion of it. It could be 310 acres. It wasn't as agrarian use. So the question that he and I discussed was, what does that mean? So I think you took a look and some others, if we had our druthers, what would we like that to be? That was really the genesis of the line item that we said, let's kind of do a study about maybe a teaching farm. Teaching farm came up a lot. Is like, gee, that would be really neat. That's where we would be collaborating with the parks, with our farmers and with other stakeholders, what makes the most sense. Because if you turn land into a farm, it is not a one-time, let's pay up front and it's done, as you all know. It's the house analogy still. There's ongoing maintenance to minimize erosion, et cetera, cover crops. What makes sense is something that we would collaborate, that would be in our plan.
Okay.
Any more?
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to take up any more time.
All right, Commissioner Giroux?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few things very quickly. Barbara, of course, thank you so much. Nancy, thanks for your service as well. Really appreciate this. So the second thing, with respect to our farmers in the room, I want to thank you guys for what you do. It sounds like, sir, your family were the original Hornets, essentially. So anybody that understands history, you understand that reference. So, yeah, thank you. And my family and I, we love Hodges. It's right on the border of my district, so I come there a lot, but just love it. And I do think Yvette is here, and it's so important for Johnson C. Smith to be engaged in these conversations. because they're going to be able to provide a lens that is very, very important with respect to people of color and the work that they're doing. And we know how how folks have been disproportionately impacted in the space. And so I'm really glad to see the way that we're addressing that and how it aligns with board's priorities. And Erin, of course, when I looked at the proposal, you knew the buttons to push, and you know where I'm going, because I think that equity lens, and you just really always demonstrate the application. And I do want to say how much we appreciate that. And obviously under the leadership of Dr. Johnson is very important, because it does start at the top. So thank you all for your work.
Thank you. Trying to think if I have a question, because I think Commissioner Altman, you know, what is the next step? And I do have, my first question is, have you reached out, because on a Zoom call during COVID, we were with the Bragg family. Have you reached out to them about a partnership on, you know, the teaching farm? Because they have enough
He has some
land.
health issues, and so while I stay in touch with him, and he actually is doing work with our district for conservation on his farm, I haven't had any extensive ear-to-ear conversations for a while.
So
I think that we will, and I think also, I know that Mr. Wallace has talked about, we've talked a lot about mentorships as well as other farmers wanting to help young farmers, but I'm happy to re-engage.
yeah, I think that's an important addition to, because I know the teaching farm keeps coming up. And I think that would be a strong possibility. And I thank you again. I love the heart of the farmers. I love that there's so much pressure from developers, probably knocking on your doors, begging you to sell. But you don't want that legacy. And I really appreciate that, because I wonder how people can do that. So I have a friend, she says, golly, I love old farmers. So thank you for being here. And thank you for being committed to stewardship. When I worked on Connect Our Future in the past 15 years, and I'm pretty sure Nancy Carter was right by my side, we heard from the regional priorities. This is one of the top regional priorities, is resilience and protecting our farms. And when I first came to Mecklenburg County in 1986, Huntersville and Cornelius were out in the middle of nowhere, you know, so the nurses I work with were like, call me when you get home, because Huntersville, you know, it's just out in the middle of nowhere. And so it makes sense that that is where the most farmland remains when you're looking at the map. And did Scott make both of these maps for you?
Yeah, he's made several.
Okay, he is outstanding. So I would just say, thank you for your work on this. Thank you for all the good energy. And please, Dr. Johnson, please let Dina, please let her know that we would like a lot of environmental stewardship in our sausage.
We will align it to the implementation plan.
All right, I will tell her. All right, I think that's everything. I just really want to talk about how important of a priority that was in the past 15 years. And this is when we were doing Connect Our Future, all the community feedback. We put green yarn on the areas that we had to protect, critical watershed and things like that you have to protect. And then we had Legos to build out what the estimated population was going to be. The real population has exceeded what they were projecting at that time. The burden on our water resources the burden on our natural resources is so huge that if we don't do things like this, I don't know the future. And so I really appreciate the heart of people who worked to do this, because it's a never-ending obstacle course. And so I just want to say that, like, thank you for your good energy. And I believe that we're all with you on this. So thank you. Is there anything you want to add, Nancy Carter?
Thank you for the response to this. is our visionary, and she's the second vice president of our state association. So Dr. Leslie Barber,
Bless all of you. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Even though I don't want to adjourn. Thank you.